Hello everyone, welcome to another lecture on C++ programming language. On this lecture, which is our fourth lecture, we discuss about variables and data types in C++ programming language. So we discuss what is a variable, how we can declare or define a variable, how we can initialize the variable, how we can use the variable in C++ programming language, and also we discuss about, or we explain we talk about data types in C++ programming language. What is a data type and how many data types we have in C++ programming language and why we use them. So let's start by talking about variables. Variables in C++, when we write the program, we use them to store value. If we need to store any kind of value in our program, we use variables. And variables act like a container which holds our data. So actually, a variable is, store our information on computer memory. So if you go to on facebook.com and you don't have an account, so let me give you a real example. So you go to the facebook.com and you don't have an account. On the first page of facebook.com, if you click the sign up button, it will, open a form for you. So it will open a form for you. It says, here is a text box. It says your first name, your first name. Then there is another text box or text field which says last name. There is another text box which says date of birth. Date of birth. So there is another text box for date of birth, and there is another text box for gender. Or you have a checkbox here. Male or female, F or M. And there is another text box. Here is for email or phone number. Email or phone number. And there is a button called, register. So if you see in this form, the Facebook asks for registration. Like we enter here our first name, we enter here our last name, and also we have here a password. It asks for the password. So it asks for your first name, it asks for your last name. You enter your first name here, you enter your last name here, you enter your date of birth here, you select your gender, then you enter email, your phone number, then you enter your password, and then you click register. So actually, these are all information we enter, they are all data or information. Our first name, or last name, or email, password, date of birth, so all of them are information. So what happens at the back end of the form, if you enter here Mike as your first name, so you enter Mike, this Mike value goes and is stored inside the variable. And if you enter your last name, this last name goes and is stored inside a variable. If you enter your date of birth, this date of birth, like suppose 01/01/2000. This database, date of birth is stored inside the variable. So basically, any information you enter in this form, there are some variables at the back end which store our information. Then by using those variables, we can store our information permanently on the database or in the file in the computer. So this is an example of real usage of a computer or a variable. Or another real usage, if you want to buy something from Amazon website, it asks you for your card number, your Visa card or MasterCard number, the expiration date, and also the name on the card, the zip code, and also the security code. All of this information is stored in the variable. Then from the variable, they store on the database. So variables actually are containers which used to store our information. We also studied at school On the, we have in school we have a math subject, like it says x equal to 5. So 5 is a value and the x is a variable which is stored as value. So 5 is value and x is variable. The same if we say y is equal 10. So here y is variable and 10 is the value of the variable which is stored inside, and this is the assignment operator which stores this value inside the variable. So we already have some information about variables. Same way we can use the variables in programming to store our information. So how we can use them, how we can declare a variable in a program. So if you have a program like ash include, I write here ash include IO stream, we write a C++ program. Then we have using namespace is td. Then we have our main method, integer main, our main function. Inside our main function, when we want to store information, so we need to declare variable. It means we need to define a variable. How we can define a variable, or it's called also variable declaration. So when we want to use a variable, first we need to declare that variable. Declaration or declare. Declaration, variable declaration. So how we can define? We use data type. First we define the data type, then variable name. Variable name, and then semicolon. So the variable name may be a number, maybe X, or maybe Y, maybe a phone number, maybe an email, maybe any name you want to use here. So how we can, if we want to store information, like if we want to store integer number, so we define the name of the variable called like number. We put number, and then in front of that the data type should be integer and then semicolon. So now we defined a number, we declared a number which is name is the number, we declared a variable with the name of number, and the data type is integer. It means this number can only store integer values or whole numbers. So actually this one is the data type. So the data type defines what kind of value we can store inside our variable. When we want to store information or data inside computer memory, we have to tell the CPU or the computer what kind of information we are going to store. Or our information is or data is number, a whole number, is it a decimal number, is it a text, or is it a character? We have to tell explicitly to the computer what kind of information we store. So that one is we define data type. So the data type basically tells the computer or the CPU that this variable, which name is number, can store only integer values, can store only whole numbers. Like whole numbers can be 10, can be 5, can be 1, 2, 3, 4, or can be a negative value like minus 51. So any number without decimal part. So it's called whole number or decimal or integer, sorry. So that's we use. So this is called variable declaration. So when we declare a variable, then we can initialize this variable, because we declared a variable in our program because we need it. So the second phase is you have to initialize this variable. Initialize. Or it's called variable initialization. You see, variable initialization. First, we declare our number variable. We say, okay, we define the data type, then the variable name, semicolon. Then we initialize this variable. So how we can initialize with this variable? So we say this number, or variable which is called number, is equal to 100. So this is, the 100 is our value which is stored inside our variable. So we define this variable here, we declared this variable to store information or data. So our information, our data is 100. So this 100 is stored now inside the number, and this is called variable initialization. And we have here the operator which is used is called assignment operator. Assignment operators. And now basically we can use this variable, like suppose we can cout. We say cout variable name number. Yeah. So when we want to use variables inside our programs, first we need to declare them. We should first define the data type, then the name of variable, then semicolon. Here we declared a variable called number, the data type is integer, and semicolon. So it's called a variable declaration, which we define, we introduce our variable to in our program. And when CPU sees this, this statement, it checks that this number is a variable and it can only store whole numbers, which is integer. And then we initialize this variable in second phase. So how we can initialize? We can use the equal, operator, or we can say the assignment operator. And we assign a value to our variable, and this 100, which is a value stored inside the number, and then we can use the variable like print out the value of the variable. So basically if we write our complete program, so I can tell you, like if we have a value of like here I can define a variable like type like integer x. This is a variable x, and I can say x is equal to 10. This line is called variable declaration, and this line is called variable initialization, because we initialize this variable. We assign a value to this variable which is 10, and in this line we introduce the variable. So then we can cout x, and now the output will be 10. So it will be 10. So in C++ we have different kind of data types. So if we want to store, because we have different kinds of data or information, so we have, for that reason we have different types of data types or variable types. So one is integer or int. It is used to store whole numbers. Whole numbers, like 10, like 51, like minus 20. So they are whole numbers without fractional part or the numbers. So whole numbers, if we want to store the whole numbers in our program, we need to use the data type integer. Then we have another data type which is called float. This data type is used to store a small decimal point number. Small fractional numbers, or the numbers which is not whole, they have decimal point. Fractional numbers, like like 10.5, like 1 to 3.4, like minus 2.6. So they are called, decimal point or floating point numbers. So we can say floating point numbers. The number which has, the number which is not whole, and they have, some fractional part or some decimal part. The third variable, data type we have integer, float, then we have long. Oh, I'm sorry. It's double. We have double. The double data type is used to, large floating point numbers, to store large floating point numbers. If you have a large floating point numbers, like the difference between the float and the double, both of them, store floating point numbers, but the float is used to store small numbers and the double is used to store large numbers. And they have, the float has a precision of, 7 numbers after decimal point, and the double has 15, digits precision on the, floating point numbers. The fourth, which we have, it is, bool data type. So the bool data type is used to store true or false. True or false. True or false. So we will see on example of this on a computer. So we will practically work. So the bool data type is used to store true or false. We need true or false because we need to check conditions. Like if you enter your username and password, it says if username is equal to this, or if password is equal to this, log into the system. So it's used for conditional. And the fifth type of data type which we have, it is string. If you want to, store information, text information, or a string, you need to define a variable type of a string. Like we want to store our name, like our full name or country name, or a paragraph. We use, a string, and it should be inside double quotes. So this one is used to store text. And the sixth type of data type which we have is char, or character. If you want to store character inside the variable, so you have to define the type of the variable, character or char. So it should be inside single quotes. So if we so these are, the data types which we have in C++. The built-in data types or primary data types, they call primary or built-in. Integer is used to store whole numbers. If you want to store whole numbers in your program, so you need to define the data type as int for a variable. Then we have float, which is used for small floating point numbers, and then we have double is used for large, floating point numbers. Then we have boolean, which stores true or false. Then we have a string, which is used to store text, and then we have character, which is used to store characters. And how we can define the string and characters variables? So let's check it. If we want to store a name, so like I write string. This is the data type, and then the name. Like I want to store my first name, so I write first name equal to Mike and semicolon. And the string or text always should be, inside double quotes. So any value you put in C++ inside double quotes is called string. Even if you put a number here, Android, which is inside double quotes, is translated as a, string. So how we can characters, if you want to define a variable type of character, we used char or char. Then we use the name, like I use later, name of the variable later equal to a. I want to store a, and the character should be always inside single quotes. So we have here single quotes, so we store the character a inside of the later. And also about naming convention, if you want, we have naming convention in C++. So please remember that a variable can have, the name of variable can have letters, small or capital, digits or underscore, but it cannot start with digits or with numbers. And also please understand that the variable cannot have, space. Like if you define a variable like say first name, you cannot define like this. So you have to, we cannot have a space between names. And also the variable names cannot, contain like hash symbol or $sign. And also, the variable names cannot include, cannot have, the C++ keywords. keywords or words in C++ which has a special meaning for C++. Suppose we say one of them is integer. So the name of our variable cannot be integer, because when you put integer in the C++, says, oh, you want to define a variable type of integer or the float. So now it's time to go practically, work with examples on the computer. So now I'm on my Windows computer. So let's open our code blocks. So I open my code blocks to create a new project. Yeah, so now my code block is opened. So I create a new project, go to the file menu and then create project, then create console application. So from here, okay, next we select the language C++, project title. I called variables and data types. So next, finish. So my project is created successfully. So I click on main.cpp. As you can see, we have our main function. So today in our lecture, we discussed about, C++ variables. So variables are containers for storing data values. If you want to, store information in computer memory, so we need, to define variables, to declare variables and use variables. So we have different kinds of variables. So how we can define the variables? So let's go and talk about first variable declarations. Variable declaration. So in order to define a variable in our program, we need to first define the data type. Then we need to, define variable. Then we need to define variable name, and then we can, initialize. So if you want to store integer values, so we define integer. So I define declare a variable called x and then semicolon. So this variable, which is, the name is x, only can, store integer values like, 100, like, 34, like it can be, a minus, number like minus 67. And if we define a variable, declare a variable type float, so y, so it can store only, floating point numbers, like small floating point numbers like 20.22, or minus, it can be a negative number like 4.5. If we define, we declare a variable type of double, we need to store, a large amount of, a big number of, floating point numbers. So we define a variable double z, and that value may be like, like big, floating point numbers. And then if we want to store strings, so we need to define the string variable. Like I want to store my name, so we need to type here a string name. So the string always should be inside double quote, like Mike, or like a sentence. If you want to store, character, we use char, like char later, and the later should be always, in uh, single quotes. Okay, so this is called variable, declaration. So we can define a variable type bool to store, true or false, like is correct. So this is called, variable declaration. So we need to first, declare our variables. When the CPU execute this line, it sees there is a variable type integer. So this variable x only can store, the value of Android whole numbers. Whole numbers. Then if you define the float, data type, so it means the variable y only can store, floating point numbers. And we define if variable is defined, the type is, double, it only can, store, floating big floating point numbers. So if you want to store the name or text or string, so you need to define the variable data type string and the name of the variables. And then we have, if you want to store a letter, like, a character like A or B or C, you need to define a variable type of char. And then if you want to, store like true or false values, you need to define a variable type bool. And always remember that the character should be inside single quote, like A or B. Anything you put inside the single quote is, is considered as, character. So now let's, initialize. The second step is to initialize these variables. Variables initialization. Initialization. So it means we should, we declared our variables because we need them. We need them to store some value inside them. So like I can use here x is equal to um, equal to 10, and then I can say y is equal to um, 0.56, because y is, a floating point number, a floating point variable. And then we can say z is equal to like a big floating point numbers. And then we have a string name is equal to v, and this, the value of the string always should be inside double quotes. So I can say name is um, Cristiano. Cristiano. So this is a name. And then semicolon if you want to character, if you want to store character. So we initialize the later because we already defined the variable declared. So now initialize character like A. And if you want to, uh, we have a variable called is correct. So I can give him a value of true. So now it is time, we declared our variable, we initialized our variable, and now we need to, print it out, use variables. So I can say cout. I can say here uh, value of x is x, and this then we can use also the new line character if you want, or you make it simple for you. So I can print x. And then if you want to add a new line, like suppose if I have a text like hello world, and now semicolon and cout, and I can print, another sentence here, another line, or let's define like this. I can say first line, and then I can say here second line. So you can see what I mean. If we, you know, execute this program, compile and run, we can see, okay, it says first line and second line. They're all the same lines, but I want to, the second line text should be on the second line. So in C++, you can use, backslash n. Backslash n means a new line. So it moves the cursor to the new line. So now if we print, you see, this is the second line. So now first line, second line. And also uh, in C++ for new line, we can use backslash n, or you can use another called string manipulator, which is end line, ENDL. So it means end line. So if we now compile and run, So it will be, first line, second line. So either you can use n line or backslash n, but I prefer to use backslash n. So now let's, print the value of our variables. So I see cout x, and then I say n line, then cout y, and then n line, cout z, and then n line. So we print out the value of our variables we defined. Cout name, then n line. Go to the new line. Then cout later, n line. And then cout is correct, n line. So now if I run this program, if I compile and execute this program, you see value of x, value of y, value of z, value of string, value of character, value of boolean. The boolean also, if something is true in C++, is considered 1. We said boolean is true. If it's false, it's considered 0. So you remember this. So now let's, write a single, example. Like I want to print out my first name and last name to the, computer screen. So what I do, I write two variables, string, first name. And I define another variable, declare another variable, last name. And then first name is equal to a given name, like, Donald, the current president of US. And last name I initialize to, Trump. And now I want to print out. So I can print out, first name, then end line. In another line, I print out the last name. Let's, compile and run this program. We can use this button, or you can use build, build and run. It's the same. So now it's Donald and Trump. But from output, you cannot understand what is this output. So it's better to say here, like when you say cout, when you cout, say your first name is, then we can say first name, we print, then end line. Okay. And the same thing we can define here. So we can say cout your last name is last name, end line. And now I can, compile and run this program. I can see here it says your first name is Donald, your last name is Trump. It's much more meaningful. So you can concatenate multiple, output values using the insertion operator. So first I want to say like insert this value, and I say insert the content of the variable, then go to the next line, end line, and then in this line, I insert first on the screen your last name is, or I print the screen your last name is, and then the content of the last name. So let's, work in another example. Like I define, I want to add two numbers together. How I can do that? So I can define first two variables, integer number 1, integer number 2. So I need two variables. So now initialize these variables. Number is 1 is equal to like 1, 2, 3, and number 2 is equal to like 4, 5, 6. Now I can define another variable which is stored, I can say integer Sam. Yes. And I can see Sam is equal to number one plus number two. Which means we add these two numbers together, number one plus number two, and store it inside a variable Sam, which we declared here. So now I can say cout, I can see Sam is equal, and now I print the content of Sam, and I can put also \n instead of n line. \n means new line. So now we can run this program. And it says Sam is equal to 579. Ah, let me show you something else. So we declared these two numbers, but we can declare these two numbers in one line as well. Like we can say integer number one, because they are the same time, number two, and also I can say Sam. And instead of declaring, in multiple lines, if the variables are the same time, so we can declare, this multiple variables at the same line, which is the same type. And this variable should be separated by a comma. Or I can say here float temperature, Fahrenheit, you know. So these two variables are the type of float. And also in C++, when we define like integer x is equal, so we can also, uh, declare initialize a variable at the same time. So we can say integer x is equal to 10. And now cout, we say x is equal x. X is equal to 10. So we can, in C++ 17, C++ version 17, and C++, version 23, which is the current version of C++, you can, define a variables, like I can define a variable integer x, 10. I can use inside, parentheses. And this is called copy initialization. Copy initialization, because the value of 10 copied inside the x, and this is called direct initialization. Direct initialization. And we have also list initialization. We can say integer x, so we can use, uh, the braces, curly braces, like say 10, like this. They're all the same. So let's put this one is x1, this one is x2, and this one is x3, because we cannot have the same variable multiple times. So we can define only unique variables names. So you cannot have integer x, integer x, integer x. No. So the variable names should be unique. So now if I want to print, like suppose that one is 10, another is 100, and another is 1000. If I print x1 is equal to like x1, now I can print the value of, x2. So you can, also copy this line. No need to type. But if you want to type, you can type it. I can copy because it's the same. So x2 is equal to, I print the x2 variable, and I print the x3 variable. And now let's see. Yes, so you can see x1 is equal 10, x2 is equal 100, x3 is equal to 1000. So we have three different, different kind of initialization in C++. So you can use, uh, copy initialization, this one, or you can use, direct initialization, and you can use, the curly braces initialization, or it's called a list initialization. Sorry, let me write here. This is called, this is the modern way to, uh, assign a value to the variable. So 100 stores inside this x2 and the 1000 stored inside x3. And the good things about this is, so I can show you something here. So let me give you an example, okay? So you understand what I mean. So if I have an integer x, a value x equal to 10.5. And now if I see out this and I say x is equal to x and I put here n line. So now we can see the result. What will be the result? The result will be 10 because the x is type integer. So it only can store, whole numbers. So the whole part of this number is 10. So it cannot, store, the fractional part or the decimal part. So let's run it. Yeah, you can see the x is equal 10. This is the issue with, with uh, the copy, initialization, because it removes the part of, fractional part, because it only can store, the whole number, the integer number. So if we use this example with, you know, with a list initialization, so I can see 10.5 here. And now if we run the program, compile and run, look, it does not run because it shouldn't be run, because the compiler checks exactly that this number should be a whole number, so the program should be compiled and run. Otherwise, it will not. And that is, like called, this is called, because sometimes actually, if you miss part of a number, so that's not good, especially in calculation, like in banking system. If you remove the part, like if someone has, uh, mm, like for every customer, suppose you have $100.05. So if you for 1,000 customer, that 5 cents become too much money, so you need exact calculation. And the good things about this kind of initialization is this is exact, and it will not allow the program to run until you fix the issue. So if I remove now the fractional part, decimal part, now save the program and compile it, you see now it's working. So this one, the list initialization is introduced in C++, 17. So you can use anyone you interested and you wanted. So most of the time programmer use, the copy initialization, like integer x is equal to 10, integer y is equal to, 20. And also remember that you have to use descriptive name if you want to store the name of a country. So you just don't define a string z is equal to like USA. Okay, please use descriptive names. Like I say, string country is equal to USA. Or suppose you want to, store a salary. So you can say double salary is equal to 23,000. Like I can say 5,000 US dollar. So you should use, descriptive words. So this was today lecture, and I hope you enjoyed from this lecture.